Admiral Yoon sat in the command chair of the Soul's Pride, watching the countdown timer on the main display. 24 hours until the Vrelian fleet arrived. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their voices calm as they coordinated with hundreds of other ships. The flagship was positioned exactly 12 light hours ahead of the Council defense line, just as Commander Daewon had promised. Behind them, 8,000 Council vessels waited in their defensive formation, probably expecting to watch the human fleet get destroyed before they had to fight themselves. Lieutenant Hana, now serving as Yoon's tactical officer after her transfer from the Horizon's Edge, looked up from her console. "Admiral, the Council observers are requesting a status update. They want to know when our fleet will arrive." Yoon allowed himself a small smile. "Tell them our fleet is already in position." Hana relayed the message, then paused as the response came through. "Sir, they're asking how many ships we have on station. Their sensors are only detecting the Soul's Pride and her escort group." "That's correct," Yoon replied. 12 vessels currently in real space. He could imagine the confusion on the Council ships right now. 12 ships to face 3,000 Vrelians. The Council probably thought humanity had changed its mind, or that this was the best they could actually manage. The truth was far more interesting. Across the bridge, his communications officer called out, "Admiral, we're receiving emergence clearance from all battle groups. Fleet coordination confirms ready status." "Acknowledged," Yoon said. He leaned forward slightly in his chair, his expression becoming serious. "How long until the Vrelians reach our position?" 4 hours, 37 minutes, Hana answered. 4 hours. Yoon had spent 3 decades in the military, working his way up from a fighter pilot to fleet commander. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies, put down rebellions on frontier worlds, and defended human space against threats the Council never knew existed. But this was different. This was the moment when humanity would reveal itself to the galaxy. He pressed a button on his armrest, opening a channel to all human command ships scattered across nearby space. "This is Admiral Yoon to all battle group commanders. Begin emergence protocol in 3 hours. Coordinates are locked. Execute on my mark." Confirmations came back one by one. Each battle group commander acknowledged the order with practiced precision. There was no hesitation, no fear in their voices. These were men and women who had trained for this exact scenario countless times. On the Council flagship Unity's stand, High Chancellor Vorath studied the tactical display with growing concern. His crystalline structure reflected the worried expressions of the other delegates gathered around him. "They have 12 ships," the Korthan military observer said, his scaled face twisted in confusion. 12 ships positioned ahead of our line. This is suicide." "Perhaps they plan to retreat once they see the Vrelian fleet," suggested the Elysium representative. "A strategic withdrawal to join our forces." Vorath wasn't so sure. He had interacted with humans for decades, first as an ambassador and now as High Chancellor. They were strange creatures, soft-bodied and short-lived compared to most spacefaring species. But there was something in their eyes, a stubborn determination that made them unpredictable. "Open a channel to the human flagship," Vorath ordered. The communication took a few seconds to establish. When Admiral Yoon's face appeared on the screen, he looked completely calm. Behind him, the bridge of his ship hummed with activity. "Chancellor," Yoon greeted him with a slight nod. "Admiral Yoon, I must ask you to reconsider your position," Vorath said carefully. "Our sensors show only a small force at your location. The Vrelian fleet will overwhelm you in minutes. Please withdraw to our defensive line. Let us face this threat together." Yoon's expression didn't change. "Chancellor, I appreciate your concern, but humanity's position remains unchanged. We will engage the Vrelians at this location." With 12 ships, the Korthan observer couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. "For now," Yoon replied simply. Before Vorath could ask what that meant, the communication ended. The human admiral had cut the channel. Time crawled forward. 3 hours became 2, then 1. The Vrelian fleet appeared on long-range sensors right on schedule, a massive swarm of warships moving in perfect formation. Each vessel was enormous, built for conquest and destruction. Together, they represented enough firepower to level entire planets. On the Soul's Pride, Hana watched the enemy fleet approach on her tactical display. The numbers made her stomach tight. 3,000 Vrelian warships versus 12 human ships. Even knowing what was about to happen, the odds looked impossible. "Admiral, the Vrelians are entering weapons range in 30 minutes, she reported. "Good," Yoon replied. He opened the fleet-wide channel again. "All battle groups, this is Admiral Yoon. Begin emergence in 15 minutes. Coordinates Alpha through Zeta. Show them what humanity brings to the fight." Across human space, the call went out. In orbit around Earth, massive shipyards released their docking clamps. Colonial defense fleets powered up their engines. Military stations that had been operating in silent mode suddenly blazed with activity. Every human world, every station, every outpost that could field a warship responded to the call. The ships began jumping to faster than light speed, heading toward the coordinates Admiral Yoon had designated. They traveled through the strange realm between normal space where distance meant nothing and time moved differently. It would take them minutes to cross light years. On the Council flagship, alarms suddenly blared across every sensor station. "What is that?" Vorath demanded, staring at the displays. The Elysium sensor officer's musical voice was high with shock. "Spatial distortions. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. Ships are emerging from FTL," the Corthan observer said, leaning forward to study the readings. "But these signatures? They're all human." In the empty space between the Soul's Pride and the approaching Vrelian fleet, reality began to tear. Small at first, then larger, ripples in space-time appeared like wounds in the fabric of the universe. And through those wounds, ships emerged, human ships. They appeared in perfect formation, organized into battle groups with military precision. Destroyers came first, fast and deadly, their hulls painted in the dark colors of the void. Then frigates, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Cruisers followed, each one larger than most Council warships. Behind them came the heavy vessels, battleships, and dreadnoughts that dwarfed everything else in sight, and the emergence didn't stop. More spatial distortions appeared. More ships dropped into real space. The counts on Council sensors climbed steadily upward, the numbers increasing so fast the computers struggled to keep up. 1,000 human ships. 2,000. 5,000. 10,000. "This is impossible," someone whispered on the Council flagship's bridge. But the emergence continued. Battle groups arrived from Earth, from Mars, from the colonies scattered across human space. Ships that had been built in secret, trained in hidden exercises, prepared for the day when humanity would need to show its true strength. 20,000 ships. 30,000. 40,000. Lieutenant Hana watched her own displays light up with friendly contacts. She had known this was coming, had seen the mobilization orders, but the reality of it still took her breath away. The sheer scale of humanity's military force was staggering. "All battle groups report emergence complete," the communications officer announced. "Total fleet count 47,312 vessels. All ships combat ready." Admiral Yoon stood from his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew worked with focused intensity. On the main display, the human fleet stretched across space like a wall of steel and purpose. "Send a message to the Vrelian fleet," Yoon ordered. "Tell them they have one chance to withdraw. If they continue their approach, we will consider it an act of war against humanity." The message was sent. On the Council ships, the delegates watched in stunned silence as the human fleet held position, waiting for the Vrelian response. In the command ship of the Vrelian fleet, Commander Supreme Vrelkoth studied the readings with cold calculation. His species had conquered 17 star systems by understanding their enemies and exploiting weaknesses. The humans had more ships than expected, yes, but numbers alone didn't win battles. "They hide behind quantity to compensate for inferior technology," he said to his officers. "Press the attack. Target their largest vessels first. Once their command structure falls, the rest will scatter." The Vrelian fleet didn't slow down. They didn't even acknowledge the human warning. They simply continued their advance, weapons charging, ready to add one more species to their list of conquered civilizations. On the Soul's Pride, Hana reported the Vrelian response with a grim tone. "Admiral, they're not withdrawing. They're accelerating toward us. Weapons hot." Admiral Yoon returned to his command chair. His hand moved to the armrest controls, his finger hovering over a specific button. Around him, his crew waited for the order they all knew was coming. "Send a message to all ships," Yoon said quietly. "Weapons free. Engage the enemy." He pressed the button. Across 47,000 human warships, combat systems activated. Weapons that had been designed, built, and tested in secret powered up. targeting computers locked onto Vrelian vessels. They braced for a fleet. Then humanity showed its true might. Commander Day One stood at the window of her ship, watching the stars drift past in silence. The horizon's edge was 3 days from Axiom Prime, the largest station in Council space. She had made this journey dozens of times before, but today felt different. The emergency signal had come through at midnight, marked with the highest priority code. All Council representatives were ordered to report immediately. Her communication officer, Lieutenant Hana, approached with a datapad. The young woman's face was tight with worry. "Commander, we're receiving more reports. It's bad." Daewon took the pad and scrolled through the intelligence briefing. Her expression didn't change, but her grip on the device tightened slightly. The Vrelian Dominion had declared war on the Galactic Council. Not just a border skirmish or a territorial dispute. Full war. The Vrelians were not a species anyone wanted to fight. Over the past century, they had consumed 17 star systems. Entire civilizations had vanished under their advance. Their military was ruthless, efficient, and seemingly unstoppable. And now they were coming for the Council. "How long until we reach the station?" Daewon asked. 18 hours at current speed, Hana replied. "Push the engines. Get us there in 12. The Council chambers on Axiom Prime were built to impress. The massive circular room could hold thousands, with viewing platforms rising in tiers around a central speaking floor. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps and fleet positions. Today, the chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from all 12 member species gathered. Daewon entered through the human delegation's entrance. She wore her formal uniform, dark blue with silver trim, the Earth insignia on her shoulder. As she took her seat, she noticed how the other delegates were clustering together in small groups, their body language tight and defensive. Fear had a smell in this room, even across different species. High Chancellor Vorath entered last. The Talnik stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline body reflecting the lights of the chamber in rainbow patterns. When he moved to the center of the floor, the room fell silent. Even the translator devices seemed to hush. "Representatives of the Galactic Council." Vorath's voice resonated through the space, translated into a dozen languages simultaneously. "We face the greatest threat to our alliance since its founding. The Vrelian Dominion has launched a full-scale invasion of Council space." The holographic display shifted, showing a vast swarm of red markers moving through the star map. Each marker represented a Vrelian warship. Daewon counted quickly. 3,000 vessels, possibly more. "Our intelligence indicates the Vrelian fleet will reach the Outer Council territories in 48 hours, Vorath continued. "We must mount a defense immediately. I am calling upon all member species to contribute their naval forces to a unified fleet." One by one, the species representatives stood and pledged their ships. The Korthan offered their dreadnoughts, massive vessels with armor thick enough to withstand sustained bombardment. The Elysium promised their cruisers, equipped with energy shields that could protect entire battle groups. The Talniks would send their carriers, each one holding hundreds of fighter craft. The numbers added up quickly. By the time 8 species had spoken, the Council defense fleet numbered over 8,000 ships. It was an impressive force, larger than anything the Council had assembled in recent memory. But everyone in the room knew the truth. 8,000 against 3,000 sounded good, until you remembered that the Vrelians had destroyed larger fleets before. When it came to humanity's turn, all eyes turned to Daewon. She stood slowly, her movements calm and measured. She walked down to the central floor, her boots clicking softly on the polished stone. "The human delegation has heard the Council's call," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Humanity will respond." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Some looked hopeful. Others looked skeptical. Humans were the newest members of the Council, having joined only 70 years ago. Most species still thought of them as naive newcomers, barely out of their own solar system. "Humanity will handle the Vrelian threat," Daewon continued. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then someone laughed. It was a strange chittering sound from one of the insectoid species. Others joined in, a wave of amusement rippling through the chamber. Vorath raised one crystalline hand, calling for quiet. His faceted eyes studied Daewon with something that might have been concern. "Commander Daewon, I believe there may be a translation error. Are you saying humanity will contribute to the defense? No, Chancellor, Daewon replied. I am saying humanity will handle the Vrelian threat, alone. The laughter died instantly, replaced by confused murmuring. One of the Korthan delegates, a massive creature with thick scales and powerful shoulders, stood up. Commander, I mean no disrespect, but do you understand the situation? 3,000 Vrelian warships are approaching. This is not a border patrol mission. Daewon met his gaze without flinching. I understand perfectly. Another delegate, this one from the Elysium, spoke up. Her voice was high and musical, but there was an edge to it. Commander, according to our records, humanity has registered approximately 150 vessels for Council peacekeeping operations. Are you suggesting these ships can defeat the entire Vrelian fleet? I am suggesting, Daewon said carefully, that humanity has the military capacity to handle this threat. We request that all Council forces hold at the designated defense line. Human forces will engage the Vrelians before they reach Council space. The murmuring grew louder. Some delegates were shaking their heads. Others were checking their data pads, probably reviewing human military records. Daewon could guess what they were seeing. A small fleet, mostly patrol ships and light cruisers. Nothing that could stand against the Vrelian dominion. Vorath's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly, a sign of deep thought among his species. Commander Daewon, I appreciate humanity's courage, but I must advise caution. The Vrelian military is unlike anything your species has faced. They have destroyed civilizations with millions of years of history. Perhaps it would be wiser for humanity to contribute what ships you can and fight alongside the Council fleet. With respect, Chancellor, humanity's position is clear, Daewon replied. We will engage the Vrelians. We ask only that the Council fleet remain in position as a secondary line of defense, should one be needed. Another wave of laughter rippled through the chamber, but this time it was tinged with disbelief rather than amusement. The Korthan delegate who had spoken earlier stood again. This is madness. The humans will be slaughtered. We cannot allow them to throw away their lives. The human delegation appreciates your concern, Daewon said, her tone still perfectly calm. But we are not asking for permission. We are informing the Council of our intentions. Vorath looked troubled. His species valued honor and directness, and he could see that the human commander was completely serious. But he also had a responsibility to protect all Council members, even from their own mistakes. Commander, I must ask, Vorath said slowly, does Earth's government support this decision? Have they authorized you to commit humanity's forces in this way? I speak with the full authority of the United Earth Assembly and the Colonial Defense Network, Daewon replied. She pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic seal appeared in the air, showing the official symbols of Earth's government and military command. All necessary authorizations have been granted. The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. The delegates looked at each other, unsure how to proceed. On one hand, they were relieved that someone else was willing to face the Vrelians first. On the other hand, watching a Council member commit suicide by military stupidity was not something any of them wanted. Finally, Vorath made his decision. Very well, Commander Daewon. If humanity insists on engaging the Vrelians independently, the Council will not stop you. But know this, we will maintain our defensive fleet at the agreed coordinates. When your forces fall back, we will be ready to receive you and continue the fight. The unspoken message was clear. When, not if. The Council expected the humans to fail. Daewon nodded once. Understood, Chancellor. Humanity will take up position 12 light hours ahead of the Council defense line. We will await the Vrelian fleet there. She turned and walked back to her seat, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. As she sat down, Lieutenant Hana leaned over and whispered, Commander, they think we're insane. Let them, Daewon replied quietly. She pulled out her personal communicator and typed a brief message. The encryption was military grade, unbreakable by Council technology. The message was simple. Authorization granted. Begin fleet mobilization. Across human space in 100 star systems, the message was received. In orbital shipyards and military stations, crews began running to their posts. Captains opened sealed orders. Admirals reviewed battle plans that had been prepared years in advance. The Galactic Council thought they knew humanity. They had seen the small peacekeeping fleet, the diplomatic vessels, the merchant ships that traveled between colonies. They thought they understood what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In 48 hours, the Vrelian Dom. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Council convened again in the Great Chamber on Axiom Prime. But the atmosphere was completely different from before. Where there had been condescension and barely hidden amusement at humanity's boldness, now there was cautious respect mixed with genuine fear. Commander Daewon entered the chamber alongside Admiral Yoon. The other delegates watched them with new eyes. These weren't naive newcomers anymore. These were representatives of the single most powerful military force in known space. High Chancellor Vorath called the session to order. His crystalline body reflected the lights with less brightness than usual, a sign of stress among his species. We gathered today to discuss the aftermath of the Vrelian conflict and to address questions that have arisen regarding humanity's military capabilities. He turned to face Daewon and Yoon directly. But first, on behalf of the entire council, I must offer our deepest apology. We treated humanity with disrespect. We dismissed your capabilities. We laughed at your offer to defend us. We were wrong, and we are sorry. Daewon inclined her head gracefully. The council's apology is accepted, Chancellor. We understand that our military strength came as a surprise. Perhaps we should have been more transparent from the beginning. That brings us to the questions, said the Korthan delegate, his scaled face serious. Commander Admiral, we need to understand what we're dealing with here. How many ships does humanity actually possess? Admiral Yoon stepped forward to address the assembly. As of this morning, the combined human military fleet numbers 94,317 vessels across all categories. This includes everything from patrol boats to heavy dreadnoughts. Our shipyards are currently producing an additional 600 vessels per year. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. Several delegates exchanged worried glances. The Elysium representative, her musical voice tight with concern, asked the question many were thinking. Admiral, that's more ships than the rest of the council combined. Why does humanity need such an enormous fleet? Yoon's expression remained calm and professional. Because when humanity first reached the stars, we were alone and vulnerable. We didn't know what we would find out here. We didn't know if we would encounter friends, enemies, or something worse. So we prepared for the worst possibility. He gestured to the star map floating above the chamber floor. Every human colony, every settled world, every station maintains its own defense fleet. It's not a centralized military like some species have. It's a network of forces, each one responsible for protecting its own territory but able to coordinate when needed. Commander Daewon added her perspective. Earth itself learned hard lessons over thousands of years of history. We fought wars against each other, destroyed ourselves multiple times, and nearly went extinct more than once. Those experiences taught us that survival requires strength and preparation. When we finally unified and reached the stars, we brought that lesson with us. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. Finally, a representative from the Talnic species spoke up. His voice was thoughtful rather than accusatory. Admiral, your explanation makes sense, but it raises another question. Why did humanity hide this strength from the Council? We have been allies for 70 years. Why let us believe you were weak? Yoon took a moment before answering, choosing his words carefully. We didn't hide our strength exactly. We simply didn't advertise it. When you asked about our military capabilities, we told you about our peacekeeping fleet, the ships we use for Council operations. You never asked about our home defense forces or our colonial militaries. He paused, then continued. And honestly, there was a strategic advantage to being underestimated. If potential enemies thought humanity was weak, they might ignore us or dismiss us as a threat. That gave us room to grow and prepare without constant challenges. Daewon stepped forward. But there's another reason, too. We wanted to see if the Council was truly committed to peace or if it was just another power structure waiting to exploit weaker members. We needed time to judge your character before revealing our full capabilities. The Korthan delegate bristled slightly at this. You were testing us? That seems dishonest. No more dishonest than assuming we were weak because we didn't boast about our strength. Daewon replied evenly. Every species in this chamber keeps secrets. Every government has information it doesn't share freely. Humanity simply chose to keep our military strength private until the moment we needed to reveal it. High Chancellor Vorath raised a crystalline hand, calling for calm. These are fair points on both sides, but we must move forward. The question now is, What does this mean for the Council? How do we proceed with this new understanding? The discussion that followed was intense. Some delegates argued that humanity should take a leadership role in Council military affairs, given their obvious superiority. Others worried that giving humans too much power would upset the balance that had kept the Council stable for centuries. A few expressed concern that humanity might use their military advantage to dominate the other species. Admiral Yoon listened to all of this without interruption. When the arguments began to circle back on themselves, he asked for permission to speak. Vorath granted it immediately. Members of the Council, Yoon began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I understand your concerns. A sudden shift in power can be destabilizing, but I want to make humanity's position absolutely clear. We have no interest in controlling the Council or imposing our will on other species. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various delegates. We seek what we have always sought: security for our people, peaceful coexistence with other species, and the freedom to grow and explore without fear. The fact that we have a large military doesn't change these goals. Daewon continued where Yoon left off. However, we also want to make one thing perfectly clear. We will defend ourselves and our allies with every resource at our disposal. The Vrelians learned this lesson. Any other species that threatens the Council or humanity's interest will learn it too. The message was delivered calmly, almost gently. But the steel underneath was unmistakable. Humanity was offering friendship and cooperation, but not submission or weakness. A smaller delegate from the insectoid species chittered nervously. What about sharing your technology? Your weapons clearly outperform ours. Will you help improve Council defenses? Yoon and Daewon exchanged a quick glance. They had anticipated this question. We're willing to share some tactical knowledge and coordinate training exercises, Yoon said. But our weapons technology will remain restricted for now. Not out of selfishness, but out of caution. We need to ensure such knowledge doesn't fall into the wrong hands. This caused some grumbling, but most delegates accepted the reasoning. After all, every species kept their most advanced technology secret. The Elysium representative asked another pressing question. What about the Vrelian prisoners? You captured Commander Supreme Vrelkoth and hundreds of other senior officers. What will humanity do with them? We're transferring them to Council custody, Daewon answered. War crime tribunals should be held for those who committed atrocities during the Vrelian conquests. We'll provide evidence and testimony, but we believe the Council should handle the legal proceedings. This affects more species than just humanity. This answer seemed to satisfy many delegates. It showed that humanity wasn't planning to act unilaterally or take over Council functions. High Chancellor Vorath spoke again, his tone more confident now. I propose the following arrangement. Humanity will share tactical coordination with Council military forces. We will conduct joint training exercises to improve our collective defense capabilities. And humanity will take a seat on the Council Security Committee with full voting rights. He paused, then added, in return, humanity agrees to respond to Council defense emergencies when called upon, just as other member species do. Does this seem acceptable? Yoon and Daewon conferred quietly for a moment. Then Daewon nodded. The terms are acceptable, Chancellor. Humanity agrees. The formal vote was called. One by one, the species representatives cast their votes. The resolution passed unanimously. A new era in Council history had begun. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, several approached the human representatives privately. The Korthan military observer, who had been so dismissive before the battle, bowed respectfully. Admiral Yoon, I spoke poorly of you and your species. I was wrong. Your tactical brilliance and your fleet's discipline were extraordinary. I hope we can learn from you. Yoon returned the bow. No offense was taken. You had no reason to think otherwise based on what you knew. I hope we can work together in the future. Similar conversations happened throughout the chamber. The mood was one of cautious optimism. Yes, humanity had shocked everyone with their military power, but they had also shown restraint and willingness to work within the Council structure. That counted for something. Later that evening, Daewon and Yoon met privately in a secure conference room aboard the Soul's Pride. They could speak freely here, away from diplomatic niceties and careful political language. Do you think they'll trust us? Daewon asked, pouring 2 glasses of water from a pitcher. Yoon accepted the glass thoughtfully. Some will. 6 months had passed since the battle with the Vrelian fleet. The galaxy had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. News of humanity's overwhelming victory had spread across every inhabited star system, carried by traders, diplomats, and military observers who had witnessed the battle firsthand. Captain Hana now held a permanent position on the Council's Security Committee, working alongside military representatives from other species. She found the work challenging but rewarding. The other officers treated her with respect now, asking questions about human tactics and listening carefully to her answers. Today she sat in a strategy meeting with representatives from 6 different species. They were reviewing the latest intelligence reports from the frontier regions. The Corthan officer, whose name was Torak, pushed a holographic display toward the center of the table. "These are deep space sensor readings from the past week," Torak said, his scaled face serious. "We're detecting unusual ship movements near the edge of Council space. Large formations, military configurations. We believe it might be the Korth Collective." Hana studied the data carefully. The Korth Collective was another major power, more advanced and numerous than the Vrelians had been. Council intelligence had been tracking them for years, watching their slow expansion toward Council territory. "How many ships are we talking about?" she asked. "Preliminary estimates suggest at least 5,000 vessels," replied the Elysium officer. "Possibly more. They're maintaining formation discipline and moving with clear purpose." Hana felt a familiar tension in her shoulders. 5,000 ships was a significant force, but after fighting 3,000 Vrelians, the number didn't terrify her the way it might have before. Still, the Korth were supposed to be more technologically advanced than the Vrelians. That made them dangerous. "Have they made any hostile moves?" she asked. "Not yet," Torak said, "but they're getting closer to Council space. At their current speed, they'll reach the outer territories in 3 weeks. Hana nodded slowly. "I'll report this to Admiral Yoon immediately. In the meantime, I recommend we increase patrol frequency in the border sectors and prepare defensive positions." The other officers agreed. The meeting adjourned and Hana immediately opened a secure channel to human command. Admiral Yoon was in his office aboard the Soul's Pride when the message came through. He listened to Hana's report without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "The Korth," he said finally. "We knew they'd show up eventually. Sir, do you think they're planning an attack?" Hana asked. "Hard to say," Yoon replied. "They might be testing our response, or they might be looking for new territory and don't realize they're heading into Council space. Either way, we need to be ready." He pulled up a star map on his display. "I want you to coordinate with the Council fleet. Start running defensive drills. Make sure everyone knows their positions and roles. But don't mobilize the full human fleet yet. Let's not escalate the situation unnecessarily." "Understood, sir," Hana said. Meanwhile, in a distant star system, the Vrelian war crime tribunals were reaching their conclusion. Commander Supreme Vrelkoth stood in a council courtroom, listening as the judges read their verdict. He had been found guilty of multiple counts of crimes against sentient beings, including the destruction of civilian populations and the enslavement of conquered species. The lead judge, a Talnix named Vorel, spoke with quiet authority. "Commander Supreme Vrelkoth, you led campaigns that resulted in the deaths of billions and the suffering of countless more. The evidence against you is overwhelming and undeniable." Vrelkoth stood straight, his expression unreadable. He had accepted his fate months ago. "However," Vorel continued, "you also ordered your fleet to surrender when continued fighting would have resulted in even more deaths. You chose to preserve the lives of your remaining crew rather than fight to the last ship. This shows some capacity for mercy, even in defeat." The sentence was announced: life imprisonment on a secure facility, with the possibility of parole after 50 years. Other Vrelian officers received similar sentences, scaled to their individual crimes. The harshest sentences were reserved for those who had personally ordered atrocities. Admiral Yoon attended the final day of the trials as an observer. Afterward, he was approached by Vrelkoth's guards, who informed him that the former commander had requested to speak with him. Yoon agreed, curious about what the Vrelian wanted to say. They met in a private room with guards present but standing far enough away to allow conversation. Vrelkoth looked older somehow, worn down by months of confinement and the weight of his crimes. "Admiral Yoon," Vrelkoth said, his voice quiet, "thank you for agreeing to see me. What did you want to talk about?" Yoon asked directly. Vrelkoth was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to understand. My species has been conquering others for a century. We developed strategies, weapons, tactics that defeated everyone we faced. Then we met humanity and everything we knew became worthless. How did you do it? Yoon considered the question carefully. You want the tactical answer or the philosophical one? Both, if you're willing to share them. Yoon leaned back in his chair. Tactically, you made assumptions based on incomplete information. You saw our small peacekeeping fleet and assumed that was all we had. You thought numbers would compensate for inferior technology. You underestimated our coordination and training. Those assumptions cost you the battle. He paused, then continued. But philosophically, the answer is more complex. Your species conquered because you were stronger than those you fought. You relied on that strength. Humanity learned to never rely on strength alone. We learned to be smarter, faster, more adaptable. We learned that survival means constant preparation and never assuming you're unbeatable. Vrelkoth absorbed this slowly. We thought we were unbeatable. That was our real mistake. Yes, Yoon agreed. Arrogance is a greater weakness than any lack of technology or numbers. Before Vrelkoth could respond, an urgent alert sounded on Yoon's communicator. He checked it quickly, his expression tightening. I need to go. There's a situation developing. The Korth collective fleet had reached Council space, but instead of attacking, they had broadcast a message requesting diplomatic contact. High Chancellor Vorath immediately assembled an emergency meeting of the Council Security Committee. When Yoon arrived at the chamber, he found it already filled with nervous delegates. Commander Daewon was there, along with Hana and other senior military officers. The Korth message was being displayed on the main screen. The Korth ambassador was a tall, slender being with silver skin and large eyes. Her voice was calm and measured as she spoke. Members of the Galactic Council, I am Ambassador Sura of the Korth Collective. We come in peace and request permission to enter Council space for diplomatic discussions. She paused, then added, We have been observing your conflict with the Vrelian Dominion. We were impressed by the Council's unity and strength, particularly the military capabilities demonstrated by the human species. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Korth had been watching. They knew about humanity's fleet. Vorath stood to respond. Ambassador Sura, the Council welcomes peaceful diplomatic contact. However, your fleet approaching our borders has caused concern. We must ask about your intentions. Sura's expression remained neutral. The fleet is a standard diplomatic escort, nothing more. We understand it may appear threatening given recent events. If it would ease tensions, we can withdraw most of our ships and approach with a smaller delegation. Yoon leaned over to Daewon and whispered, This is interesting. They're being careful, respectful. That's not how the Vrelians acted. They learned from the Vrelians' mistake, Daewon whispered back. They saw what happens when you threaten the Council now. The Council debated the Korth request for over an hour. Some delegates argued for accepting the diplomatic overture. Others wanted to maintain a defensive posture until the Korth intentions were clearer. Finally, a compromise was reached. Ambassador Sura, Vorath announced, the Council agrees to diplomatic talks. However, we request that your main fleet maintain position outside Council space. You may bring a delegation of no more than 50 ships to Axiom Prime for discussions. Sura bowed slightly. These terms are acceptable. We will arrive in 5 days. Thank you for your hospitality. The channel closed. The chamber erupted in conversation. Hana turned to Admiral Yoon. Sir, do you think this is genuine? Or could it be a trick? Yoon considered the question. I think it's genuine. The Korth are being smart. They watched us destroy the Vrelian fleet. They know we have the strength to defend the Council, so instead of fighting us, they want to talk. That shows intelligence and caution. But we should still be ready for anything, Daewon added. Prepare defensive positions, keep our fleet on standby. Hope for peace, but plan for war. Over the next 5 days, the Council prepared for the Korth arrival. Human ships took up strategic positions around Axiom Prime. Council security was increased. Diplomatic protocols were reviewed and updated. When the Korth delegation finally arrived, they kept their word. Exactly 50 ships, all flying diplomatic flags, approached the station peacefully. Ambassador Sura and her team were welcomed aboard with full honors. The first shots came from the Vrelian fleet. Massive energy beams lanced across the void, bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. They targeted the largest human vessels, the battleships and dreadnoughts that hung in space like silent mountains of metal and purpose. The beams struck shields and armor. Explosions bloomed in the darkness. 3 human ships took critical damage in the opening seconds, their hulls breaching as atmosphere vented into space. But the rest of the fleet didn't hesitate or scatter. They simply returned fire. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for decades. The human fleet didn't charge forward in a single mass like the Vrelians expected. Instead, they moved in coordinated battle groups, each one with a specific purpose. The forward elements were fast attack ships, thousands of frigates and destroyers, that suddenly accelerated to speeds the Vrelians hadn't thought possible. Commodore G1 commanded the fast attack groups from her destroyer, Lightning's Edge. She was young for her rank, only 32. But she had trained for this her entire adult life. Her fingers flew across the tactical controls as she coordinated her forces. All ships execute pattern Delta 7, she ordered. Target their sensor arrays and communication relays. Blind them first. 2,000 human ships broke formation and dove into the Vrelian fleet like sharks into a school of fish. They didn't try to destroy every enemy ship they passed. Instead, they fired precisely at specific targets, knocking out the systems that let the Vrelians coordinate their massive fleet. A Vrelian cruiser tried to track one of G1's destroyers, its main guns swiveling to follow. But the human ship was too fast, too agile. It slipped past the cruiser's firing arc and launched a spread of missiles directly into the enemy's sensor cluster. The missiles detonated with savage efficiency, and suddenly the Vrelian ship was deaf and blind, cut off from its command structure. Commander Supreme Vrelkoth watched his tactical display with growing alarm. Red warning indicators were appearing across his fleet as ship after ship lost contact with command. The humans were dismantling his coordination systems with surgical precision. All ships maintain formation and switch to local targeting, he ordered. Don't let them separate us, but it was already too late. The human fast attack groups had done their job. The Vrelian fleet was no longer a unified force. It was 3,000 individual ships, each fighting its own battle, and that's when the main human battle groups attacked. Vice Admiral Taman commanded the heavy assault forces from the battleship Incheon's Fury. His ships were built for one purpose: overwhelming firepower. As the fast attack groups pulled back, his vessels moved forward in tight formation. All batteries fire at will, Taman commanded. Target their capital ships. Let's show them what real firepower looks like. The human battleships opened fire. Railguns launched projectiles at speeds approaching light itself. Each shot carried kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. When they hit Vrelian ships, the results were catastrophic. Armor that had withstood countless battles shattered like glass. Hulls crumpled. Ships that had been intact seconds before suddenly became expanding clouds of debris. But the railguns were just the beginning. Missile batteries released swarms of smart weapons, each one equipped with its own targeting computer and maneuvering thrusters. The missiles didn't fly in straight lines. They dodged, weaved, and adapted to enemy defenses. When Vrelian point defense systems shot down one missile, 3 more slipped through from different angles. Energy weapons joined the assault. Focused laser beams that could cut through shields given enough time. Particle cannons that disrupted matter at the molecular level. Plasma weapons that burned hot enough to vaporize armor plating. The Vrelian fleet tried to respond. Their ships were powerful and their weapons were deadly. They destroyed human vessels by the dozens, their superior technology showing in individual engagements. But for every human ship they destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. The mathematics of the battle were brutal and undeniable. On the Council flagship, the observers watched in silence. The tactical display showed a scene of organized chaos. The Vrelian fleet, so intimidating an hour ago, was being systematically torn apart. How are they doing this? The Korthan observer muttered. The Vrelians have better shields, better armor, more powerful weapons. How are the humans winning? High Chancellor Vorath understood, even if he didn't want to admit it, because they're not fighting ship to ship. They're fighting as a true fleet. Every human vessel is part of a larger strategy. The Vrelians are fighting individually, and in war, coordination defeats raw power. The battle entered its second hour. Commander Supreme Vrelkoth realized with cold certainty that he was losing. His fleet had been cut to pieces by the human fast attack groups. His command structure was in chaos, and now the human heavy ships were systematically destroying his largest vessels. He tried to regroup his forces, to create some kind of defensive formation, but every time he gave an order, human ships appeared exactly where they needed to be to disrupt his plans. It was as if they could read his mind, anticipate his every move. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. Humanity had been studying warfare for thousands of years. They had fought each other in countless conflicts, learning lessons in blood and fire. They had refined their tactics through centuries of simulation and training. When they finally reached the stars, they brought all that knowledge with them. The Vrelians had conquered 17 star systems, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Admiral Yoon watched the battle unfold from his command chair. His expression was calm, but inside he felt the weight of every human life lost. Each destroyed ship represented hundreds of crew members, men and women who had trusted him to lead them to victory. "Admiral, the Vrelian fleet is attempting to retreat," Lieutenant Hana reported. "They're trying to break contact." "Don't let them," Yoon replied. "Send in the carrier groups. I want those ships stopped before they can escape." Fleet Captain Minji received the order aboard her carrier Busan's wings. She was older than most of the other commanders, nearly 50 with silver streaking through her black hair. She had been flying fighters since she was 18 and commanding carriers for the past decade. "All squadrons launch," she ordered. "Intercept the retreating Vrelian ships. Target their engines. Disable but don't destroy if possible." The hangar bays of 200 human carriers opened simultaneously. Thousands of fighters and bombers poured into space like a swarm of angry insects. Each craft was piloted by a human, not an AI or a drone. The Council species preferred automated fighters, finding it wasteful to risk pilots in small craft. Humans saw it differently. A human pilot could think, adapt, and improvise in ways no computer could match. They could take risks, make split-second decisions, and coordinate with each other through instinct and training, and they were willing to put themselves in danger to protect their fleet. The fighter swarms fell upon the retreating Vrelian ships. They were too small and too fast for the large weapons to track. They slipped through point defenses and shields, targeting specific systems with pinpoint accuracy. Engine clusters exploded. Power plants went critical. Command bridges were breached. One by one, the fleeing Vrelian ships stopped running. Some surrendered, broadcasting distress signals and shutting down their weapons. Others fought to the last, their crews choosing death over capture. The human fighters showed no mercy to those who continued fighting, but accepted the surrender of those who gave up. Commander Supreme Vrelkoth sat in his command chair, watching his fleet die around him. His flagship was one of the few capital ships still intact, but it was surrounded by human vessels. Weapons were locked onto his ship from a dozen different angles. There was no escape. His communication officer approached hesitantly. "Commander Supreme, the humans are broadcasting a surrender demand. They offer to spare any ships that power down their weapons and shields." Vrelkoth's species didn't surrender easily. They were warriors, conquerors. Surrender meant shame, dishonor. But looking at his display, seeing the wreckage of his once mighty fleet, he understood something important. The humans hadn't just defeated him. They had crushed him. They had taken his fleet apart like a teacher correcting a child's mistake, and they had done it with such efficiency, such precision, that continuing to fight would only be throwing away lives for nothing. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked quietly. 783, sir. Less than a quarter of our original force. 783 ships left from 3,000, and the human fleet barely looked damaged. They had lost ships, yes, but their formation was still intact, their coordination still perfect. Vrelkoth made the hardest decision of his life. "Send the surrender signal. Power down all weapons. Order all remaining ships to follow suit." The battle ended 6 hours after it began. Of the 3,000 Vrelian warships that had attacked, fewer than 800 survived. The rest were destroyed or so badly damaged they couldn't fight. The human casualties were painful but sustainable. 237 ships destroyed, 412 damaged but repairable. On the Council flagship, the silence was absolute. The delegates stared at their displays, trying to process what they had just witnessed.